Hey everybody, it's time for another episode of Alex on Answers, and with me I have Stefan, our new correspondent from the Los Angeles area. He's working from home, obviously, so everybody say hi, Stefan. If you have any questions, be sure and email them to him with the email address down there at the bottom of your screen. So without further ado, let's dive into the interesting things that we saw on the news this last week. I want to go ahead and start us off, Stefan?
Sure. So obviously more SUVs, more crossovers, never-ending cycle. We got to feed the ravishing masses their SUV fix. So in case you forgot Mitsubishi didn't exist anymore, well, they kind of made their presence known again by releasing the 2022 Outlander, which is based on the Nissan Rogue.
So
Got
it's
the same
basically a three-row
platform.
Rogue, right?
Same platform, same engine. Here's the kicker, though. The 2020, the plug-in hybrid is the old version. For now,
Huh.
we get a carryover, and we finally get all the upgrades that Europe got on the plug-in hybrid Outlander. So there's a more powerful rear electric motor.
Hmm.
Battery capacity went up from 12 kilowatts to 13.8, and you get a 2.4 liter engine instead of a 2 liter. So EV range went up to 24 miles, so that's 2 miles more than the old car, and then total range went up to 320 roughly with a full charge and a full gas tank.
Did they
So
say anything about fuel economy? Because that's always been a problem with the Outlander, was its fuel economy wasn't exactly great.
it is up. So let's check fueleconomy.gov because I believe it was 26 miles per gallon. 26 miles per gallon combined on the combined cycle.
That's
And
quite a
70
bit lower than the RAV4 Prime then.
yeah. Yeah, that's the thing. It's still it's still well below the RAV4 Prime. And
Interesting. Huh.
price-wise, they're not really that far apart. Staying on the topic of Nissan, we have the new Qashqai in Europe, aka Rogue Sport here.
And that will
The
get their
big
new
news
hybrid system, right?
that will get their new hybrid system in Europe. That has the e-Power system, and for those of you who don't know e-Power, it's a series hybrid. So the gas engine is just there as a generator. What's powering the car is really just an electric motor, and and you're really kind of driving an EV with a backup
Mm-hmm.
plan. The kicker is, what do you call it? Is it's front wheel drive only.
Oh, that I did not
You
know.
can't get you can't get a Rogue Sport. You can't get a Qashqai with the e-Power if you want all-wheel drive.
Interesting. I
And
thought
if you
Nissan
get
had been promising us a dual motor thing, or is that just sort of
yeah,
later in other
so
things?
it's already being used with a 1 liter 3-pot that's not turbocharged in Japan in the Note. So I mean, it can't be that hard for them to just add another electric motor into the Qashqai, right?
You'd assume.
So
Hmm.
yeah, and then the funny part is the Qashqai. If you get all-wheel drive, you get a multi-link rear suspension, but if you get front-wheel drive, you get a torque and beam. At
Hmm.
least for Europe. We don't know when it's coming here yet, but really, to be honest, I wish they would keep that car here because there's actually room for it between it and the kicks. Anyway, going on to other news, to other global market news before we head back to the U.S., the global market Honda HR-V got revealed.
Yes, the Vezel, which is the weirdest
The
name ever.
Vezel. Mm-hmm. So it's a
Cute
hybrid.
car.
Oh,
Yes.
yeah. Totally looks good. If you ever search for it online,
Hmm.
it has like this, the grill is really kind of weird but kind of cool at the same time. It just looks like a bunch
Yeah,
of
yeah.
slots. We don't know what we're going to get here yet, but Honda's official statement on that is that the US/North America in general will be getting their own version of the HRV.
Right.
And my guess is that we're getting the 1.5 turbo as the base engine, or we're getting a hybrid. And I hope it's the hybrid. It's the inside's hybrid, in that output, because that particular hybrid system, the 1.5, could have anywhere from 109 horsepower and 187 pound-feet
Hmm.
of torque to about 150 horse, almost 200 pound-feet, depending on which version it's on.
The
With
eternal
the
problem
with
with Honda's hybrid systems is their highway fuel economy isn't as great as some
yeah,
people would like. And in America,
hmm
we tend to drive a lot more highway miles than
hmm
in some other markets, so it's a little bit less of a problem for European drivers that are in the city and
yeah,
maybe they're not doing long road trips than it is for the U.S. So
yeah.
in news up here in Northern California, we got our new Ford Mustang Mach-E. It arrived. So if you haven't checked out the intro video, be sure and check out that. There's also going to be some range testing, some battery charging videos. I'm going to be taking it on a road trip down to drive the new Chevy Bolt next week, so that should be fun too.
Good word.
So we'll see how long the charging takes.
So back to the U.S., the Koreans have some new product. So the Hyundai Kona, the refreshed Hyundai Kona just got shown for the U.S. market, and there's an N-line version, and that's sitting in between the regular car and the full-fledged N. So that will. It's kind of weird though, because the N-lines and the SUVs don't seem to have that many changes. Like this one, it's really mainly cosmetic. The powertrain is
Kona Turbo.
Yeah, it's just Kona Turbo, and no suspension changes. It's exactly the same as the Limited. The output is, they bumped the output 20 horsepower for both of them, and now the EV doesn't have a grille. And then last but not least for the U.S. cars is the Carnival. I mean, if you love minivans, I mean,
minivans are such a weird market because there's all of a sudden we're getting major changes to all of them. They all come in the same wave. All the minivan manufacturers release new minivans practically at the same time. And they've all got slight little twists, but they're all that practical family hauler that everybody, seems to really need, but nobody wants. No one's going to run out and just go buy a Kia Carnival because of its name or because of the luxurious seats. No one's going to be the hip mom going to soccer practice in their Carnival. It's just not a thing.
So we have a bunch of really awesome burning questions. Someone's looking for a good car for seniors. They're leaning heavily to the Venza, but the price of the Venza is giving them second thoughts. Mm-hmm. Get that or a used RX 350.
Interesting. So when I think of these questions, like, a car for specific age groups, generally speaking, I'm thinking either child practical features for young families, or I'm thinking like ease of getting in and out, really, is what most older folks that I know are interested in. So there, in that respect, I would mainly look at crossovers that are about the right height for your H point or your hip point. So one of the reasons that crossovers, minivans have been so popular, with people over 65, over 70, et cetera, is that it just makes getting in and out easier. Yeah. So something like that, the Toyota Venza, I would actually say is a good option because it's going to be comfy, it's going to be reliable, it's going to be efficient, and it's definitely going to be easy to get in and out of. I think anything really in that compact and mid-sized crossover segment is going to be a good option there. And what you don't want to do is what my parents, have done. So, my mom is knocking on 80's door, and she has a Jeep Grand Cherokee. Even with the air suspension, she has troubles getting in and out of it because she's 5'2" on a good day. And so it's not a good thing. And to get in and out of the pickup truck, they carry a stool around with them. So these are things I wouldn't recommend doing. Obviously, they could work if you're willing to do that, but I think carrying a stool around with you so you can get into your truck sounds ridiculous.
Here's a question on the is luxury worth it category.
Oh, I love these.
Yeah, right. This is a good one. Is an A4 Premium Plus really worth the premium over an Accord 2-liter Touring?
See, the problem, my eternal problem with the is luxury worth it question comes down to what is that logo worth to you on the hood? And that sounds trite and ridiculous sometimes, but it really is the question that has to be answered. So, if you take a look at sister ships, I guess I would say, like an Infiniti QX60 and a Nissan Pathfinder, when you extract the upgrades, there is definitely an upcharge for that logo, for the longer warranty, for the dealer experience, etc. So that, I think, is the question that has to be answered first by you. And that's a personal choice. I'm willing to pay for a slightly schnazzier brand, but I don't know if I'm willing to pay that much more. The brand is a little bit less important to me than it is to some, but I'm willing to spend a little bit more for it.
There's that, and there's also, are you willing to pay for the maintenance?
Right. Maintenance can be a little bit more expensive, but then, Lexus has proved that Lexus maintenance isn't that necessarily that much more expensive than Toyota. So, if you ES versus Avalon, your maintenance costs are going to be quite similar. You're still going to be paying for the L on the front, though. That's a tricky one. But, aside from that, yes, there are nicer things in the luxury car. So, the luxury car is more likely to have real things inside. So instead of fake wood, you're going to get real wood. You're going to get nicer leather. You're going to get more metallic surfaces. Things that look metal may actually be metal, or maybe metal coated rather than simply plastic that's tinted. Yeah. You're generally going to get more horsepower, better handling, more elegant suspension designs. How much that matters to you, again, is a personal preference thing. But like we see this in vehicles that are related to luxury cars that have been decontented to turn into mainstream cars. So Ford was really guilty of this in the early 2000s when they bought Volvo and they decided that we needed to use these platforms in mainstream vehicles. So you can see exactly how this process works. They took a Volvo, they replaced all the aluminum parts with steel parts because they were cheaper, which made the suspension components behave differently because they were heavier, but less expensive. So that's a lot of where that difference comes in the mainstream versus luxury segment. And pretty much every Ford front-wheel drive thing from the mid-2000s that it wasn't related to a Mazda or wasn't related to a Mazda or some Ford drive platform before was a Volvo. So the Taurus, the 500, arguably the Explorer of that generation, and the Flex, and some of the Lincolns, et cetera, they all were related back to that core Volvo platform.
Next question. So we have somebody looking for a 1 to 2 year old car with the smoothest ride in the 40 to 50K range, but is willing to stretch to 70K if the car is that good and worth keeping 10 years. It must have ventilated seats. It needs to be an SUV or possibly a truck. Here are the cars that he's taken off his list. The RX, the Enclave, the Explorer, the Murano, the Passport, the Atlas Crossport, and the Grand Cherokee. This person's test-driven the Tahoe High Country, the Telluride and the Palisade, the Highlander, a Ram 1500, a Nautilus, and is considering an X5 or a Q7, but thinks it's too pricey. So
interesting. That is such a huge price range.
It's a huge price range. Yeah.
Yeah, that's difficult. Certainly anything in the luxury segment is going to be your friend there. And I would look towards any vehicle with an air suspension. So the Chevy Tahoe, I think, has a great ride if you get the adaptive air suspension combo. That's kind of where I would look.
Yukon too. If you have the Tahoe on the list, you might as well just put the Yukon on the list too.
Yep. Any of the full-size SUVs should be fine. BMW X5 has a nice ride to it, I think, as well. It's going to be a little bit firmer, but it's a nice ride if you're willing to get just some of the base models. Grand Cherokee actually has a decent ride, but it's been crossed off the list. But there is the new Grand Cherokee L.
Yeah, this person's thinking is interested in that and the Pathfinder as well. So
I would be willing to bet that the Grand Cherokee L is going to ride better than the Pathfinder because it will have a full air suspension, and the Pathfinder, next generation Pathfinder, is actually going to ride quite similarly to the current one.
In that price range, you might also consider waiting for that new QX60, which will probably get more differences and more ride tuning for comfort than the Pathfinder will.
Right. The MDX might not be a bad option as well, I think. But I would probably steer away from the Cadillac XT6 if you're not sold on the Enclave. I wouldn't XT6 either. Anything sporty is not going to be your friend, obviously. So if the first thought in your mind is, oh, that sounds sporty, that's probably not going to be where you want to go on the ride quality list. There's some good options there. Let us know what you end up selecting. Go ahead and email us, with the address down there at the bottom.
This is going to be an interesting one because we have somebody looking for a vehicle that's good on gas, but needs to be able to fit he's a person that's a little bit on the upper end of the spectrum when it comes to human sizes and comfortably fit a big person. Crossed off the Highlander and the RAV4 because the Highlander's out of the 40K budget and it has too much wind noise. The RAV4 just did not fit him properly. He found it too tight. So and he wouldn't mind going over 40K if it has all-wheel drive, standard.
If it has all-wheel drive.
Yeah. So we're talking about a person who's about 6'3", 6'5".
Okay. So
yeah.
One of the things that I've found surprising is that the Korean cars tend to have front seat tracks that move further rearward.
Yeah.
So I would say look at either American branded vehicles or Korean branded vehicles because they're generally going to have seat tracks that move further backwards. Some European brands fall into that spectrum as well, but they're going to be a little out of your price range. So I might consider something like Sorento might be a good fit. It's going to have seat tracks that move a little further back. Santa Fe is a good one as well. If the RAV4 and Highlander weren't really your thing, chances are the Pilot and Passport aren't going to be quite right either. They're very similar sizing in the driver compartment, so that's probably the direction that I would look.
You have somebody looking to upgrade from a 2012 Civic with a budget of 25 to 30K. So it must be quiet, have a great audio system, and must-haves over 30 miles per gallon, adaptive cruise, comfortable seats, 6'2", roughly per person, and must have lumbar support, preferably four-way lumbar. You
Preferably
love your lumbar
four-way.
support, Alex, so
I
you
love my
start there.
lumbar support, yes. Do love vehicles with the four-way lumbar. Honda does have a few options in the four-way lumbar category. So it's going to be a little easier to find four-way lumbar in the Honda lineup than in the Toyota lineup. Toyota doesn't do four-way lumbar until you get to much more expensive vehicles, so you can probably cross most of those Toyotas off the list. Some of the Koreans, it's hit and miss. Some of them used to do it, and now all of a sudden, Hyundai and Kia have gotten a little cheap, and so they whacked the four-way lumbar support off the list on a number of vehicles. And then the Americans generally have four-way lumbar. So your options for high mileage get a little limited there because of the lack of hybrids in a lot of those categories. But vehicles like, the most of the FCA's lineup, actually, to be honest. FCA loves four-way lumbar. So does General Motors. Ford a little bit less in their less expensive vehicles, but your chances are going to be a little bit better at finding it in sort of those categories. You might want to wait for the new Civic, I would say.
Yeah, that might be a good one to wait for, especially if you need some. If you want space, the hatchback is coming back.
Right. If you have a little bit of time, chances are good that the Civic will have four-way lumbar. We don't know yet, but chances are good.
Here's a question for why the Nissan Rogue didn't break into the best sellers list for 2020.
That's a good question. I think the biggest reason are incentives. Nissan was, of course, switching over their product to the new Nissan Rogue. So anytime a manufacturer is moving to a next generation, there's a natural tail off in sales because everybody knows the next one's coming. So that affects things. The second thing is that production slows down because they have to stop making the old ones so they can start making the new ones. There's always this natural dip in production. And then the third one is Nissan slashed their incentives. So they used to put a ton of cash on the hood. And then they stopped doing quite so much cash on the hood because, obviously that's bad for their bottom line. So I think the combination of factors are what knocked it several points down the list. But as I recall from what Nissan was saying with the last time I was talking to them about the Rogue, it's okay for them financially because the average transaction price ended up going up. So that's always better for their bottom line. I wouldn't be surprised if they started digging a little heavier into incentives now that the car has been on sale for a short while. On the subject of the Rogue, I was pretty shocked by today's news that the Rogue got 2 stars for the passenger side front crash score in the U.S. Yeah, it's very unusual for a new car to get 2 stars.
Yeah.
And so we don't know how that's going to be. If there's going to be an update, if there's going to be some other news following that. But NHTSA gave it 2 stars on the passenger side.
All right, so we have somebody who has a 2017 Volt and is looking to upgrade. Must be a PHEV or an EV, 50K budget. Already looking at the Bolt EUV and the Model X or Model Y. Do we have any other suggestions for that person to look at? And the Volt that he or she currently owns depreciate faster now that it's been discontinued.
That's a good question. On the depreciation front, I don't know. Doesn't always happen. Sometimes that can happen. It's a little hard to say. On the plug-in hybrid front, I think the RAV4 Prime is probably the best all-around, well-rounded plug-in hybrid that we have in America right now. On the EV front, you have a ton of options now because shortly there's going to be the new Ioniq. It's going to be on sale sometime this year, second half, third quarter, second quarter, third quarter,
yep.
Somewhere in there. We have the Mustang Mach-E. We have the new Volkswagen ID4. Deliveries have been pushed back and back and back, but it's promised soon because it's already on sale in Europe, and it's already in production technically. So we have a decent number of options. And then there's, of course, the new Bolt EUV. My one complaint is that I think the Bolt EUV is probably the least exciting of the bunch because it's the least changed. It's basically a moderate refresh of the existing Bolt. So if you run out and drive a Bolt now, if you run out to the dealer lot and just grab one and drive it, that's basically what you're going to be getting in the new Bolt EUV with some extra styling, some improved seats, and some massage stuff here and there, and the availability of Super Cruise. But the bulk of the vehicle is remaining the same.
And if you're willing to wait a little bit longer, there's also the Kia Niro is coming. The second generation is on its way, and depending on where you live, the EV is rumored to be a 50-state vehicle.
That's true. Yep.
Yeah.
Looks like Hyundai and Kia are finally gonna go great guns with their EVs all of a sudden.
You also have You have two more products from Hyundai Motor Group there too, because you have the Kia CV, and for Genesis you have the production version of the Mint concept, which has turned into a 4-door, and that's the GV60.
So the one thing that really struck me about Hyundai's new EV platform is that it really appears that they're going way beyond what we're seeing in the ID4, arguably, and the Bolt and other cheaper EVs out there. The cars are going to be rear-wheel drive by default. Dual motors are going to be available. They've got some pretty big battery packs, almost as
Mm-hmm.
big as what we find in the Model 3 and Model Y. And the
Mm-hmm.
dimensions are really striking. The wheelbase is
It's
2 inches
long.
longer than a Model X, even though the car is 2 inches shorter than a Model 3. So it's really going to have these extraordinarily wheels pushed to the edge proportions that I'm really eager to see how that looks in person.
Yeah.
Lots of details still to come, but definitely lots
Yeah.
of exciting options depending on how long you're willing to wait. I'd say
Oh
if you
yeah.
want to get one right now, it's hard to go wrong with the Tesla lineup, and it's probably the only one you're going to actually be able to go and get right now. Like if you want a
Mm-hmm.
Mach-E, if you want an ID4, if you want anything else really, you're going to have to be waiting on a wait list, but you can go to a Tesla store and just get your hands on a Model Y today.
We have somebody looking for a car with a similar infotainment system as Mazda in the
Interesting.
24 to 30K range.
There really
Loves the
isn't one.
UI. Yeah. He currently owns a CX5 too.
I mean, the new CX5 is going to be out soon, so you could always wait for
Yeah.
the new CX5. But if you're really not a fan of touchscreens, you don't have many options. Pretty much everybody's touchscreening.
That's
I
for
mean,
sure.
even manufacturers that were dead set against the touchscreen, like Lexus, they just went right back to touchscreen now.
And remember when Audi and BMW and Mercedes all were anti touchscreen, and all of a sudden they started putting touchscreens.
Yep, because they listened.
It's
Customers want touchscreens, so
mm,
they just want to be able
yeah.
to touch that option. Yep.
Grab another CX5.
If
There's
you want to
nothing
save a
wrong.
little bit of money and you want one right now, get a CX30 Turbo. Great. It's a great thing.
Mm-hmm. All right. Somebody from New York is looking to spend 22K maximum for a compact car that's fuel efficient, practical, inexpensive to own. It
Ooh, I
has
love
to fit a
these.
car seat. Has to fit a car seat.
Got it.
Preferably wants to buy something that's 1 to 2 years old and it must have blind spot monitoring.
Must have, blind spot monitoring is going to be trickier because that's a feature that's generally optional, even on cars that have a lot of standard active safety stuff.
Yeah.
When it
Unless it's
comes
a
to,
Nissan.
yeah, when it comes to child seat accommodations, according to the numbers, your best bet is going to be with an Elantra or a Forte or an Impreza or a Civic because they have the most legroom combined. And that's going to be
Yeah.
really important to try and squeeze that rear-facing child seat behind, assuming they're in a rear-facing seat. If they're in a front-facing seat, not as big of a problem. They'll probably all be fine. But on the size categories, if I take a look at my quick little cheat sheet here, you should definitely steer clear of vehicles like the Versa. The Corolla is actually quite small on the inside. The Mazda 3 is on the smallest side of things, as is the Golf R. We are getting a new Golf, but the legroom dimensions don't appear to be changing too much. And then the Jetta is actually fairly good as well. So those are probably your best options. If you're looking for a lot of child seat room, you could probably squeeze yourself into a midsize sedan for 22K.
Yeah.
It depends on the deals going, but that's possible that you may be able to Accord or Camry for that price, and you're definitely going to get more room in the back. Probably a better deal on the Camry on the dealer lot. So if you want to stick to that 22 price point, look for the mid-size. You could look for a low-end mid-size sedan that's got really good deals going. And one of the nice things about the mid-size category is that there are generally a lot more features standard than we find in the compact category. So, the Accord, the Camry, they've got dual zone climate control, CarPlay, and a bunch of other features generally tend to be standard or on lower end trims than you'll find in the compact category. Blind spot monitoring, you may have to look for something like a slight mid-level trim of those, or you could end up with something like a Nissan Altima, which would also be a good choice for interior room.
We have a 2014 MDX owner asking if he should wait for the new Lexus RX or just grab one or upgrade to this new MDX that you just recently drove.
Mm-hmm.
He wants to try the Lexus brand, but isn't liking the fact that Lexus and Toyota is really quiet about the next generation RX. So what should we say to this person? Because you've driven the MDX, we've both driven RXs. So
when is the new RX rumored to be out?
So
I
that's
have
supposed
not
to be
heard
this
much
year.
this year.
That's supposed to. Actually, I'm sorry. Not NX is this year. RX is next year.
Yeah,
So
I mean, if it's we're at the beginning of 2021, so that's a long wait to try and wait for the new
yeah.
RX. Lexus has been so cagey on some of these details. They're if you need a
Mhm.
three-row vehicle, your safest bet's going to be MDX right now. So many dealers have been clamoring for a three-row Lexus that the RXL was honestly a little bit of a slap in the face because it wasn't the three-row that anybody was asking for.
Mhm.
And we don't know whether that's going to be different in the next version. One would assume that they are finally going to fix this problem. That's the rumor. But the
Mhm.
timing of that and what it's going to be, we don't know.
We have somebody looking for a subcompact all-wheel drive luxury SUV or crossover.
I really love the XC40. I think Volvo knocked it out of the park. I was expecting, honestly, in my head, I was expecting it to be funky because some of the pictures and shots that came out made it look funny, but somehow they managed to scale down that Volvo-ness into a tiny package and have it actually look, I think, better, arguably, in some angles
Mhm.
than its bigger Volvo cousins. I also like the way that Volvo obviously had to make the interior less expensive, but they chose some novel solutions to the less expensive problem.
Mhm.
And I love the Q3. So if I were shopping in this segment, I think I would be really hard pressed to choose between the Q3 and the XC40. I might go Volvo just because I've had a Volvo before, and that's just where I would end up maybe. But I really, really was impressed with the new Q3 every time I've been in it. I haven't driven it yet, sadly, so hopefully soon. Once upon a time, you chose the European option because it handled better or it had more power or whatever. But when we talk about the subcompact segment, they're all going to be transverse engine front-wheel drive based vehicles now. There is no rear-wheel drive option like there used to be with the old X1. So now they're actually all on pretty even footing. So the Volvo is going to be a great option there. I would say if you're not looking to spend as much money, the CX30 is a great alternative, but it's not in the
Mhm.
same league per se. Mazda would really like us to look at it as a value alternative to the luxury segment. They're really marketing hard that way. But obviously you're going to be giving up a decent number of luxury touches and features, etc. But the CX30 Turbo is going to be really quick.
Yeah. CX. I mean, for that money too, if you don't mind going up a size, CX5 Signature isn't a bad
Mhm.
choice either. Here's an interesting one. Will fuel cell vehicles and EVs coexist with each other?
I mean, this is a tricky question, so I'm going to pull out my Alex and Otto's crystal ball over here, I guess, and pontificate. I should put my pontification hat on for the moment. Um, in a logical engineering world, which is not the market that people buy cars in at all,
Mm-hmm.
mind you, hydrogen fuel cell vehicles make a huge amount of sense in bigger vehicles. So pickup trucks, SUVs, minivans, especially anything with a frame. If you've got a truck with a frame, there's a lot of unused space to store hydrogen tanks, etc. And there's so much more energy that you can put on board of the vehicle than with a battery, even a solid state battery. Whereas in a logical world, vehicles that hang around town a lot, your daily driver, your suburban vehicle, anything in the midsize or small category, then batteries make a lot more sense because simply packaging a fuel cell in a Honda Civic or a Honda HR-V, it's just not going to work. There's just no room in there for the parts required. The Nexo is the size that it is because it's really the smallest thing you can do and fit everything in. There's a reason the Mirai is a pretty decently sized sedan, not a tiny one. That said, I'm honestly shocked that in America we don't have a fuel cell SUV or a fuel cell pickup truck just yet, because there's a considerable amount of room. Toyota's shown prototypes for quite some time, and their prototypes were perfect because there was no functionality reduction in the Tundra at all for having the fuel cell system in there, and there was still tons of room to add a bigger fuel cell if they wanted. Um, on the flip side, with battery technology, battery technology may be easier for people that live in suburbia and have a single-family home, charge at work, charge at home. If you live in an apartment, if you don't have access to public charging infrastructure, etc., hydrogen would make more sense logically in that application. People ding hydrogen for relative efficiency. Wheel to well, it's not as efficient as a battery electric vehicle. But fuel cells are not about efficiency. It's about the refueling speed, about the energy density on board. When you take a look at the kilowatt hours per kilogram of battery in a battery electric vehicle, solid state batteries may be able to get us double what we see in the current generation of lithium ion batteries. So maybe we could get a Tesla Model S with, true 600 miles of real world range with a solid state battery on board. But you still have the problem of being able to charge it rapidly. That's a lot of energy to try and charge that battery rapidly in the typical situation that we would think of as a gasoline filling window. So yes, solid state batteries will charge faster than lithium ion batteries. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the power system realities of trying to charge at a rate of, 600, 700, 800 kilowatts. That's an absolutely enormous charge rate. And even that wouldn't get you to where people want to go. We're talking megawatts as far as charge rates if you want to be able to fill in 5 minutes, for instance. So it kind of just
Especially
depends on your situation and what you're interested in. If we're talking about people jumping off the cliff to go full EV, it's still a fairly small number. And to get to that next level, we need affordable cars. We need SUVs. We need minivans. We need trucks. We need, big, 18-wheelers that are electric vehicles, et cetera. We need to have more than just sexy luxury cars with Super Cruise or with, autopilot. We need the Nissan Versa of electric vehicles to make that work. And with that, we'll have to close the episode because I think it's time to go. We'll see all of you next week.
Bye.